So friends, it is getting to be late fall. It's about November, or it is November. And what is one of the last things you can really do to preserve? It is these late season, not really late season, but these herbs that are still in the garden doing well. The sage, which for a lot of people is a perennial, thyme, oregano. Well, they're so beautiful and still plentiful this time of year. But the frost, the hard freezes, the snow, I know, but it's coming, it could take them. So the best thing to do is dehydrate them. So there's a lot of different things you could do to, dry them. If you live in a drier climate during the winter, like I do, you could actually hang these upside down. The humidity is really low. They would dehydrate okay. But one, what's quicker and what just usually goes better is to actually put them in a dehydrator. You can do a stackable one with trays, any type of one you have. If not, hang them up, use that way. My oven actually has a dehydrate function. Dehydrating is really all about the temperature. So for herbs, usually between 95 degrees and 115 degrees is kind of that sweet spot. You can go all the way up to 125 if you need to. It'll go quicker. So it only takes usually like 1 to 4 hours for these. So I'm actually gonna pop them in here in the evening. Overnight, I'll probably turn them off and I'll show you what they look like in the morning. But different herbs, I do differently. Sage, that's beautiful. I love the smell. It's super Thanksgiving-y. So sage, I do admit, I pick it off. Now, it's kind of annoying because, look at all these ones I have. But the thing is, once you dehydrate them, a lot of those sage stems, they can be pretty woody and they can kind of, when you go to crumble it, just kind of crumble with the leaves and you don't really want those in it. So the sage, that's why I go through and I pick it off. So what I did when I brought it in, I went out, just cut it off obviously, and then I brought it in and I rinsed it under cool water, rinsed it pretty well to try to get some of the dirt off because there's dirt on it. And then I let it just kind of shake dry and just kind of get off some of the excess water. You don't usually want to pat it dry or really want to like sit there and dry it with a cloth because that can bruise a lot of the leaves. Instead, you just want to like kind of air dry for a little bit and then just sit here, take it off. So that's for that. Next, we have the thyme. I love thyme. It just smells like pizza, right? But again, good for Thanksgiving. This one, I hate stripping thyme leaves too. When you want to use it, taking all those little leaves off. Even with an herb stripper, it still is a little bit hard. So instead what I do is I take just sprigs of it from the garden, big stems, and I actually am just gonna lay it on the sheet pan. These are a little bit different. When they dry, they're really easy to go through and just push off dried. So these I like to leave on the stem, and I do try to get them in somewhat of an even layer. If you stack them too much, it's not a huge deal, but they will take longer than to actually dry. So let me lay some of these out, and then we'll finish with that. And then the last one I'm gonna do today is oregano. Again, it just kind of smells like pizza, but I love it. This one, again, I don't mind leaving on the stem. They have a sturdy enough stem that once they dry, I can go through and push it off and work it that way. So I'm gonna spread these out, get the leaves off of the ones I need to, then we'll stick them in. I have oregano, I have thyme, I have sage. As you can see, it is not too exacting, it is not picture perfect. These are somewhat overlapped. That's not a huge deal, you just don't want them to be piled high. As they dehydrate, you can check them and just make sure they're fully dehydrated. You pick them up, you can kind of push them together, make sure they crinkle and kind of dry, fall apart, just kind of go down to nothing. That's the point. So a regular oven, the reason it's hard is it usually doesn't go below 170 degrees. And like I said, you want these between 95, 115, 110, somewhere in there. It doesn't usually go low enough. So if you have low humidity this time of year, hang them upside down, let them dry, that will work. If you have a dehydrator or an oven that can have a dehydrate function, mine right now I set to 110 degrees, that's gonna be perfect. So I'm gonna pop these in, I'm gonna let them go. They're only gonna take 1 to 4 hours, but I'm gonna show them to you tomorrow morning. And then we will have beautiful dried herbs. These herbs we dehydrated. It was actually pretty quick. Actually, the sage took a little bit longer. It took probably around 5 or 6 hours. So the best way to check is you can see that they're very dehydrated, but also when you pick them up, they just, look at that, they just crumble into nothing. That's exactly what you want. And that's really all you have to do to make sure that they are. You're taking that moisture out because things preserve when they have no moisture in them. So if you want to keep them at room temperature, like I'm going to do now, you want to make sure all that moisture is pulled out, so then they won't rot or anything like that. That's what moisture does. It promotes an area where things can rot. So at this point, all we need to do really is get them ready to put in a jar. Now, if you have applications where you want to use them in larger quantities like this or in bigger pieces, you could do that. I instead like to pick them up, just start breaking them down. You could also, if you really wanted to, probably blitz them in like a food processor. I don't really find that necessary. I literally just take them, rub them between my hands, and instantly, you know what it smells like? I always think sage. What do you think of? Thanksgiving dressing, stuffing, whatever you want to call it. And that's because it's what it smells like. So why do we preserve herbs? Well, one, if you're like me and you don't go to the grocery store all the time, especially in the winter, you don't have a garden in the winter, this is a great way to have that fresh taste in things because these dried herbs are just as good. So I always think the reason maybe we have given dried herbs a bad name is because a lot of times when we buy them in a grocery store, one, we let them sit in our cupboards at home way too long. Like, sometimes I'm over at my mom's and I'm like, Mom, when did you get this? And she'll be like, I don't know. And I'll be like, I think when you got married, you got this and never used it. So that's one issue. So that's why I like to dry them yearly, use what I can, and then kind of do it the next year and get rid of anything you had left over because they do lose their oils, they lose their flavor. When I get done with this, I do kind of go through them as I'm finishing up, pull out any of the extra stems maybe you missed when you were doing it. You know, some of the ones that don't break down, don't feel bad just going through and doing that. Some of the little pieces, it's not a huge deal, but this has tons of flavor. So when a recipe calls for fresh herbs, say it calls for 2 tablespoons, the dried, you for sure only need half the amount and maybe sometimes even less because dried herbs, you're condensing their flavor, you're condensing them. Look how much you're getting. Like this was a whole tray full and now look, it is condensed to a little bit. So it has a lot more punch in that flavor for a small amount. So same with when we move on to the others. So thyme, this was the one I talked about that I hated doing, but look at this guys. Look at that. You are left with the stem. So much better to do it this way. You just pick them up, they come right off, and then it's kind of one of those things you could break them down farther if you wanted to probably. I kind of leave them like this, and then as I use them, I'll kind of push them through, like if I'm making a sauce, or you know, I'll use this even at Thanksgiving and certain things. I think fresh herbs, we just need to play with and use more in general because we are so used to maybe just using, oh, just a sprinkle there and a little fluff there. No. I think they pack so much flavor. They are delicious. Don't be afraid to use them, especially when you dry them like this. Just try them in different things. That's kind of the fun part. So I'm gonna sit here, I'm gonna keep doing this, and we'll pack them up to store. So I did the sage, the thyme, and so with the oregano, it's the same thing. It had these small little stems. I left the leaves on it. I'm just pulling them off. As you can see, that makes it so nice, so much easier. And then I'm just sitting here, just gonna crumple them up. If you don't get them perfectly crumpled up, small pieces now, don't worry. When you go to use them, a lot of times when I use these fresh herbs, what I like to do anyway is take the amount I'm gonna use and just sit there and kind of just put them together with your hand and break them up even smaller. So, you know, I think we've kind of all succumbed to this idea that you have to go buy fresh herbs when you're gonna cook or when you're gonna use them in the kitchen, even during the winter. And the thing is, yeah, fresh herbs are great, but guys, if you do this once a year, these are just as good as fresh. They have a ton of flavor. You're saving a lot of money. And the thing is, if you grow any herb, even if you just grow one herb, whether it's basil, you can dry basil too. Whatever it is, you're gonna have too much of it during the growing season. This is a great way to use the excess. Otherwise, you're just throwing that money away. So don't worry that you think fresh is the only way to use it. Start using some of your dried. So to keep it, I then just take little jars. These are little Weck jars. I love them because they have a seal on them. So that seal just helps moisture, air, whatever, not get in. So I just take the herb and I just put them into the jar. I keep them by my stove, put them in a cupboard, whatever you want to do. These are also great gifts. You could mix, like, I mean, you can make your own blends, you know, your herb de Provence, you could do anything you want. Honestly, you might laugh at the whole basil thing, but basil dried is delicious and has tons of flavor. And growing up, I'm not gonna lie when I say I think that's the only way I really knew basil was
we always had that dried basil, and it really did have flavor. So don't worry, you can use any size jar you want, anything. And it instantly smells amazing in here. It smells delicious. And I think this would also maybe kind of just expand the way you cook, expand the way you make things. So I hope you go out, look at your gardens one last time, see what herbs maybe you have left over to use. Take them in, dry them, preserve them, and just don't be afraid. And do it because it's so fun. So I hope this helps. Share this video around. Check my website, wiseguy.com, for more recipes to use with herbs or other great ideas and options too. I have so much more coming at you, and I love to see you guys share these around, because when you share them, that really helps me. And it also just helps me see what other things people want to do because they comment, and I love to see that. So let's just make the world a better place by growing things, preserving them, and enjoying good food. Okay, I have more to do.